Microsoft Visual Studio Express is a set of freeware integrated development environments developed by Microsoft as a lightweight version of the Microsoft Visual Studio. Express editions were conceived beginning with Visual Studio 2005. The idea of Express editions is to provide streamlined, easy-to-use and easy-to-learn IDEs for hobbyists and students, rather than professional software developers. History: Visual Studio 2005 Express, the first version of Visual Studio Express, was released on October 2005. It runs on Windows 2000 SP4 and later. Service Pack 1 for 2005 Express was released on December 2006. In response to popular demand, Microsoft has promised the Express editions will remain free of charge. Visual Studio 2005 is supported until 2015. Visual Studio 2008 Express was released in November 2007. Service Pack 1 for 2008 Express was released on August 11, 2008. Visual Studio 2008 and 2010 Express require Windows XP SP3 or later. Although Windows 2000 is no longer supported, Visual Studio 2008 Express can still develop applications for use on Windows 2000. Windows Phone support is only available with Windows Vista and later. Visual Studio 2010 Express was released in April 2010, alongside Visual Studio 2010. Free registration is mandatory to use a product beyond 30 days. Although not originally required, for example for Visual Studio 2005 and 2008 Express, registration for use beyond the initial 30-day period has been required since the release of Visual Studio Express 2008. 2005 Euro 2010 products, Visual Studio 2005, 2008, and 2010 Express are geared towards single project types. For example, developers need to launch Visual Web Developer Express to build web applications while class libraries must be developed separately in Visual C Express. In contrast, the commercial editions of Visual Studio support multiple project types within a solution. Visual Studio 2005, 2008, and 2010 Express consist of the following separate products: Visual Basic Express, Visual C++ Express, Visual C Express, Visual J Express, Visual Web Developer Express, Visual Studio Express for Windows Phone, Visual Basic Express. Visual Basic Express has the following limitations: no IDE support for databases other than SQL Server Express and Microsoft Access, no support for web applications with ASP.NET, no support for developing for mobile devices, absence of crystal reports, fewer project templates, limited options for debugging and breakpoints, no support for creating Windows services. No support for OpenMP, limited deployment options for finished programs, no code folding. Visual Basic 2008 Express includes the following improvements over 2005, includes the Visual Windows Presentation Foundation Designer codenamed CIDR, debugs at runtime, better IntelliSense support, fixes common spelling errors, corrects most forms of invalid syntax, provides suggestions to class names when specified classes are not found. Visual Basic 2005 and 2008 Express feature a Visual Basic 6.0 converter that makes it possible to upgrade Visual Basic 6.0 projects to Visual Basic.NET. The converter is not included with 2010 Express. Visual Web Developer Express. Visual Web Developer Express is a freeware web development tool that allows developers to evaluate the web development and editing capabilities of the other Visual Studio editions at no charge. Its main function is to create ASP.NET websites. It is a WYSIWYG interface, drag-and-drop user interface designer, enhanced HTML and code editors, a limited database explorer, support for CSS, JavaScript and XML, and integrated, design time validation for standards including XHTML 1.0/1.1 and CSS 2.1. Visual Web Developer 2005 Express lacks certain features, such as the accessibility checker, the ability to create standalone class library projects, third-party add-ins and macros. Visual Web Developer 2008 Express SP1 supports both class library and web application projects. It also includes a new integrated HTML designer based on Microsoft Expression Web. However, this edition cannot publish self-developed websites. Visual C++ Express. Visual C++ Express compiles .NET and Win32 applications in 32-bit and 64-bit. It includes Windows SDK's compilers and core files, which developers can use to build Win32 applications. Limitations of Visual C++ Express: no support for MFC or ATL. These libraries can, however, be installed from an older version of the Windows SDK and Windows Driver Kit. Lack of a resource editor, which is available in commercial editions of Visual Studio. No profiling support. No support for add-ins or IDE macros, no option for crash dump generation, no list of all breakpoints window. No support for cross-language debugging, for example a C application calling a C++ DLL. Limitations in earlier versions: no out-of-box support for developing 64-bit applications. No support for OpenMP, lack of support for attaching the debugger to a running process. While Microsoft lists memory windows as unavailable in Visual Studio 2010 Express, third parties have reported that they are available when expert settings are enabled. Many open-source projects have started providing project files created with Visual C++ Express. Noteworthy examples include the Ogre and iRelict engines. Modding kits for commercial engines, such as Valve Source Engine, also support this development system. Visual C Express. Visual C Express is an easy-to-use, free, lightweight, integrated development environment designed for novice developers, students and hobbyists to create applications and video games for Windows, XBOX 360 and Zoom. It can build console, Windows Forms and Windows Presentation Foundation applications, as well as class libraries. There is a substantial community for C Express due to the many game enthusiasts that are taking up programming. Visual C Express lack a breakpoint control panel, so user can only toggle breakpoints. The following refactoring modes were also unavailable: encapsulate field, promote local to parameter, reorder parameters, remove parameters, extract interface. The limitations effectively reduce the refactoring capabilities of Visual C Express to renaming and extracting methods. According to Microsoft, the reason the listed features are absent is to simplify the C Express user experience. Some end users claim the omission of refactoring capabilities compromises the user experience. The ability to attach the debugger to an already running process is also unavailable, hindering scenarios such as writing Windows services and reattaching a debugger under ASP.NET when errors under the original debugging session cause breakpoints to be ignored. 2012 to 2013 products, unlike previous Express editions, each of which was geared around a single programming language, the 2012 Express edition is geared toward an overall solution type, and can contain more than one project type. For example, a web solution might consist of a web application project and a couple of C-class library projects. Microsoft has released 5 Visual Studio Express 2012 products. In October 2013, Microsoft released 4 new versions of its Visual Studio Express products: Visual Studio Express 2013 for Web, Visual Studio Express 2013 for Windows, originally supported Windows 8.1 only, but Update 2013.2 added support to Windows Phone 8.1 also. Visual Studio Express 2013 for Windows Desktop, Visual Studio Team Foundation Server Express 2013. Like the 2012 Express edition, they are geared toward an overall solution type which may mix different types of projects. However, different IDEs are still offered for different destination platforms. Note that Visual Studio Express for Windows Phone was not released in the set of 2013 products, but Visual Studio Express for Windows Phone is now merged to Visual Studio Express for Windows 2013.2. Extensibility: Visual Studio is extensible by nature, ultimately consisting of a core shell that implements all commands, windows, editors, project types, languages, and other features through dynamically loadable modules called packages. Microsoft encourages and fosters third-party partners to create modules for Visual Studio via the FreeVSIP program. However, according to Dan Fernandez, Microsoft made a business decision to not allow third-party extensibility in Express. See also, Microsoft Visual Studio, Microsoft Small Basic, Microsoft Windows SDK, References. Further reading. External links, official website, Visual Studio Express downloads, non-official page with links to downloads from official servers, much less complicated than the official page.